I am so honored to introduce Juneau Black, also known as Jocelyn Cole and Sharon Nagel. Have anyone of you read any of Jocelyn's other? Jocelyn writes a lot of other books than her mysteries. Has anyone read her other stuff? I would recommend it especially if you like crossing genres. She writes a lot of romance and she writes some science fiction. Sharon has also written a lot, but it's still in the computer. But Sharon, you might know Sharon because she is also a librarian at Whitefish Bay. So she runs the Mystery Book Club, where every other selection is a Juneau Black book, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
We are running out.
Please, thank you so much for coming today. We were talking about, this is our, I believe, 5th time that we've done a conversation, and I am worried that I'm running out of questions. But the good news is that I read a whole bunch of other interviews and everyone has those questions too. So have you not been to a Juneau? Because they're really good questions. So we are going to repeat ourselves a little. Has anyone never been to watched a Juneau Black interview, or is that people? Okay, see, do you feel better about this?
I do.
So may I ask either Juneau or Black, how did you come up with the idea for this wonderful series?
This is, yes, the Shady Hollow origin story.
Props.
Visual aids.
Back in the Dark Ages, Jocelyn and I were both booksellers here at Boswell. And on a particularly slow Tuesday night, Daniel asked us to price some finger puppets for the children's department. These adorable things were all woodland creatures. And while we were pricing them, we gave them names and occupations. And it was fall, so we decided to write a story about them during NaNoWriMo, which, if you're not familiar with, is National Novel Writing Month, where you write a 50,000 word novel during the month of November just for fun. And that's what we did. We cheated because there were 2 of us, and I would write on odd days and Jocelyn would write on even days, and we shared the document back and forth. And at the end of November, we had a very, very messy draft, but we had a story, and that was Shady Hollow.
The other question that everybody asks you is, and it's particularly appropriate here, I think, why Juneau Black? How did that name come about?
I'm so glad you asked that, Daniel.
You've never heard that.
As you probably have guessed, we have strong opinions about how books should be shelved because we were both booksellers, and Sharon is now a librarian. And I studied, I went to library school and then promptly didn't become a librarian. But, we went through all the things. So anyone who has ever shelved a book knows the pain of having to shelve a book that has 2 authors on it, 2 or more. What do? It's terrible. It's awful. It's awful. We don't ever want to make anyone go through that pain. So we said we were not going to do 2 names on our cover. We were going to have 1 pen name, and that was just going to be it. And so the parameters were, it had to be easy to spell. It had to be close to the beginning of the alphabet because, people's attention span, you start at the beginning and then there's like, all right, I'll just grab this one. So A, B, C, that's it. We're not going past that. So both of us, before we worked at Boswell, had worked at Harry W. Schwartz, RIP. And Schwartz is German for black. So we went with Black. And then Solomon Juneau is one of the founders of Milwaukee, a city we obviously also have affection for. And we decided to go with Juneau as the first name. So that is Juneau Black.
Well, I lived on Juneau Avenue for 20 years, and I thought it was a reference to me. And I realized, I was like, oh, I guess other people know about that too.
It was also a reference to Daniel Goldin.
Yeah. Companies would say, is there a Daniel character in the book? I was like, probably murdered somebody. So I don't really want to think about it.
Your essence permeates
Yeah,
the entire
that's
town
right.
of Shady Hollow.
We did get a request for a turkey, and I think you know who that refers to.
Oh. This is book number 5 plus 2 ebooks. I just want you to know
4.
number 4, right. I'm getting ahead of myself because I was reading one of the ebooks.
Yep.
And I got to the end and there was another book there, which we'll talk about a little later. But I just want to say I've never finished an ebook before, but that's the only way I got Twilight Falls. So
Oh, we're honored.
yes, you should be. But then I read it again because it was really hard for me. For all of you who read them, I congratulate you. That's all I have to say. So you are now really getting into the world of Shady Hollow. What has it been like to sort of expand it and find new characters in it? And can you talk about some of your favorite new characters in the new book?
Well, as we kill them off, we do need to repopulate the village. One of my favorite new characters shows up in Mirror Lake. I think he's mentioned in book 2, but he shows up in Mirror Lake, and it's Bradley Marvel, who is the wolf that is a very popular writer and is sort of obnoxious. And
It's more than sort of. He's
Yeah.
just obnoxious.
Not based on a real
not based on
person.
any we
No.
ever met, but sort of an amalgamation of a lot of them.
He's a case study in what not to do if you ever to become an author.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not at all gleaned from, collective decades of working at bookstores and meeting authors, both good and bad.
I have, in a classic way, you have a kind of a reporter at the center of the stories, Vera Vixen and her good friend, Lenore Lee, the bookseller, who is, everybody knows what that reference is. If not, we'll tell you later. But I noticed that the librarian, Arabella Boatwright, has taken a more prominent role in the stories. Any bias there? So.
Oh, well, she's wonderful, and I think I came up with her name. I like to go through old yearbooks sometimes to come up with character names. And I went to school in the South. Boatwright is a time-honored Southern name, and I thought it suited her.
What do you one of the names, I mean the names are terrific in the book. I love one of the new characters is Muriel Lodge, the mysterious popcorn salesperson.
Yes.
Would you like to talk about her, where she came about?
Muriel is new in town. She had not heard about the murder rate, so she felt it safe to move there. And she is an entrepreneur. She runs a popcorn cart, which she wheels around town to wherever the action is, and then she makes delicious popcorn for that the other citizens can buy. And Sharon is actually the person who invented Muriel, and it is a direct reference to her love for the elegance of the hedgehog.
I was curious about, is most of your, are you, a lot of times when we talk to authors, whether they're nonfiction or fiction, they wind up doing a lot of research. And I'm curious, on a book like this, is the research just finding out which new finger puppets are out? Like what kind of research do you do for a book like this? Because there's a lot of detail and things.
Well, when I still worked here, I did get rather excited when new puppets were ordered, because then, we didn't have
New
to
characters, yeah.
We didn't have to come up with something on our own. I find myself now doing more research on sort of animal behavior a little bit. So that's something that I do. I don't know what
Nature documentaries and the like.
Or realize, like, I've been looking through like lists of like what are the mammals and birds of North America or like Northern Europe, like places that are, and sort, like, it's a fantasy world, but like obviously like finding something that would be plausible. But then we also will just have sort of more exotic creatures roll in, because it's also a very cosmopolitan world, and you can take a boat to wherever you want to go. So we've had the occasional non-northern woodland creature show
panda
up.
bear.
Yeah, we have a panda. So, and he took quite a long trip to get to Shady Hollow. But yeah, so it's just whatever seems fun, but also we like to find new creatures that we haven't mentioned. There's a pika in the book that's not out yet. So you're going to meet more creatures.
Summer's End.
Summer's
that
End
one?
is
Yeah,
book
true
5.
story. I had to look up Pika. They're adorable.
They're so cute.
It's coming out next summer. Then.
It is, but maybe near summer's end.
Yes, possibly. Well, I want you to know I was like desperate, of course, anything I can do to sell a book. And so I like, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, what's the ISBN? I've got to get it in the system so people can pre-order it tonight.
You're
So,
like a hacker, but for books.
yeah, that's right. I'm curious, especially because you write in romance. So we have a lot of romance readers in the store. It's a very different world from when I started in book selling, but really fun. And one of the things I love, especially with the Rachel C, who runs our romance book club, is she's very into romance tropes, as is much of the romance world. It's like, I like this one. I watch videos and they're like, oh, friends to lovers, enemies to lovers.
Tropes are a big thing.
Tropes is a big thing. Are there mystery tropes? And do you embrace them, or do you play with them, or are there not? There are some, but like, what are the kinds of mystery tropes? Or do you borrow from, say, romance?
There's
It's a multi-part question.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
to be
well, yeah.
clear.
There's 100% there are mystery tropes. And I think they're maybe a little bit less concrete than romance tropes have become. But, like there's the locked room mystery. There's the, are they really dead mystery? There's the, like there's all of these things, and
then there were none.
And then there were none where, you're trapped in some location and the killer is still active. So there are definitely tropes, and some of the most famous mysteries have made those tropes so iconic that if you do that, everyone's like, oh, you're going to do Murder of Roger Ackroyd, but your own twist on it. Or, oh, you're doing And Then There Were None, but your own twist on it. So
It's just the way people talk about romance, though.
it is, but I think with mystery, it's like, I don't know.
Does it imply the ending? Is that because that's
Maybe
one
that's
difference
what it
between
is,
romance
yeah.
and mystery really that I see is that everybody knows the ending, everybody wants the ending. You can't mess up the ending because it's got to end where you think it's going to go. Whereas mystery, the surprise is part of
the ending
the fun.
because you don't know where it's going to end. In romance, the two protagonists are going to end up happy together, because if you don't do that, it is not a romance. And so a happily ever after, or a happy for now. But with mystery, yeah, because there might be a twist really close to the end. And the whole point is to deceive and delight your audience.
But you're a cozy, which has a romance element, a stronger romance element.
But I also think one of the things that we are trying to avoid is having Vera trip over a body every single time she leaves her door. And we call that the Jessica Fletcher effect.
Yeah.
So we're looking to make the crime a little bit more interesting, or like we had a cold case and then we had a murder that wasn't really a murder, sorry. So we're trying to make it different every time, which is really hard.
And you can't tell us what you're going to do next time, because that'll give away what the book
It would
is.
be a spoiler.
How is someone supposed to do a conversation with you?
It's impossible.
Years ago, Sharon, you kept saying, I'm going to do a Shady in the City, and I haven't seen it yet, but
Book 6.
What?
Book 6.
Oh,
Book 6.
In fact, our editor calls it Shady in the City in her notes. It's actually, I think it's going to be Shady and the City.
Right. Is it some backstory on Vera? Ooh, very nice. I was going to ask if you were going to do that. Who do you think, besides Vera, who we know has a good backstory, who do you think has the most interesting backstory that could be, say, you're going to get tired, so it's like book 11.
Well, there's always new characters, but Lenore does have a past as well that we're going to learn a little bit about in book 5. Actually, I'm sorry, we keep talking about these books that you haven't even been able to read yet.
Yeah,
but they're
does that bother? If it's bothering you, raise your hand and I'll stop doing it.
yeah. Daniel's planning ahead, but
Well, I figured most people read. Has everyone read 1 to 3? Yeah, how could you stop? Right.
well, I think Sun Lee has a very interesting backstory, and we hinted that, and we know what his background was, but I thought we could
Right.
probably do something with that.
Yeah. And I think, maybe the Chitters family, we're going to learn a little bit more about that very large family.
There are so many. There are so many chitters.
So many chitters.
Because Howard wanted to be an artist before he became an accountant. And so
Dreams.
yeah.
Have you found, like you said, you're playing with some of the, you're doing the various mystery, trying to make sure it's creative and not obvious, but what kind of, you're meeting so many of your readers now, as opposed to in the past when you're kind of writing more with, four of us telling you how, what we like. Do you find that your readers want something more traditional, like to stay within the cozy genre, or are they looking for you to experiment more?
I think people have
Should
been.
I take a vote?
Well, maybe we can do some hands up later because I'll have a couple of questions actually. Yeah. But people have been very welcoming, I guess, because this series, right? It's what's the black licorice quote? You either, if you like it, you really like it, and if you don't, you don't. So it's like sort of the black licorice of mysteries, like you're in or you're out. So I think the people who are here for a book 4 launch, you're in. So, I mean, they're sort of,
You're related.
Or you're related. So they're willing to let us go maybe a path that wasn't expected.
Yeah.
But we have heard over and over again that people are like, oh, I really want to visit Shady Hollow. Like that they love the setting as if the setting itself is a character. So we want to make sure we maintain, it doesn't mean that every story is happening in Shady Hollow 100% of the time, but that is an important location that people can sort of touch base with.
If I was less lazy than I am, I would have made those pistachio honey morning buns.
We have been asked about recipes, and we're not doing recipes. Sorry.
You could collaborate with
we can make someone else do the recipes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of famous chefs use a collaborator for that. There's a whole genre of ghost chefs who create the recipes in cookbooks. So
perhaps someday Soonly will make his cookbook, and
That's
or Joe will like
And
finally
Joe, yeah.
reveal all the pie recipes. We'll see.
My husband was compiling some recipes for Joe, but
work in progress. Yeah, got it. So one of the things is the Van Beaverpelts have now been not leads, but important
Major
parts
characters
of several books. And I've been reading a lot of books about wealth, and I just read Trust by Diaz, and actually the last you're reading Wellness right now, which is also they read well together actually. So I'm just curious, what do you think about the Von Beaverpelts? Do you think there's a dark story about that mill, or do you think that they came upon it? Is there some villainy in the past, do you think?
Any capitalism has a dark side.
Yeah.
I think we need to admit that. So like I actually have thought about this. I don't plague you with my thoughts, but like are the workers unionized? We've never said, partly because I want it to be like nice and fun, and we don't want to have to worry about real world concerns. Like, are they getting adequate healthcare? But I do think about that. And like, obviously this is a society where they're exchanging goods and services and money is a thing. And there's rich families and poor families. So I do think about it.
A lot of people, I'm not going to talk about that right now because I don't do enough. I'm working on it. But one of the things, there were a lot of comparisons, like when especially when your books were like when you were trying to describe someone who's never, like once you're in it, what the books are, but you're like you're trying to describe the book, and you're saying, and one of the things I said to somebody was like, do you watch BoJack Horseman? And which I think was probably the wrong comparison, but then it made me think of that episode they did where they're completely underwater and in the fish world.
Yeah.
Are the fish sentient too?
Daniel.
Is that book 8?
The bears do go fishing.
Oh,
so like
So they're
I-
not.
in my head, and like this is like peeling back like the sort of thing to the just like our writer process and our rules. I think the mammals and the birds, I don't want to say like warm-blooded is better than cold-blooded, and it's not because they're snakes and stuff. But
Oh,
like
there's the whole toad thing.
there's the whole toad thing.
I thought you had made them all vegetarians. I forgot.
They are, but then they go fishing. But I guess we don't ever really say they eat the fish. Maybe it's catch and release. Maybe there's like a game that's
Maybe it's more like hockey.
so. Going back to like inspirations, right? Like so the Redwall series, which is beloved children's series. I read all of them. There's in the original Redwall, he mentions like a farm horse on a cart or like that's pulling a cart. And I think it's the only reference to like a human aspect to that world. And it's only in the first book that he wrote first before he thought about getting it published. And he has actually said in interviews, he's passed now, but like when he was being interviewed about them, that he always regretted that because it broke the sort of continuity.
He should do a Taylor's version and just
I
take it
think
out.
it's a little late for him. Yeah, but it's like I think when we wrote The Bears Fishing, it just felt like a cute thing. And we didn't really think about it.
But yeah, you should think about it as a sport of the bears versus the fish.
And that could be really fun. And like, like when we talk about bees and spiders and stuff in some of the later books, so it's like they're there, but they're not necessarily communicating in the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. And last year at Books and Company, I bought a narwhal, one of the new finger puppets, which was a narwhal. So that opened up all kinds of possibilities.
Would you think you would put mythological creatures?
But a narwhal,
no, a narwhal is not a
real.
mythological creature.
Yeah, animal thing. I was thinking of narwhals are like unicorns, but
they're like a narwhal is like imagine like a walrus but with the unicorn horn.
Yeah, I always think of the horns.
They have like a single horn. It's probably where the unicorn myth may have come from because these horns would wash up. A narwhal. So maybe they're gonna go to the seaside and meet a narwhal.
What about aliens? Do you think aliens will come up? I was thinking that would be,
I think that's extremely unlikely.
Well, that would be called, because you have a background in this, so I would call it romantifantacozy.
I like that.
Has a background in this.
Yeah, that's going to be a difficult hashtag for people to spell.
Is that a romance trope? Oh, yes, isn't it?
Oh, alien romance is a thing, but I don't think alien cozy is. Yeah.
Alien romance, yeah. But wait a minute. All right. Didn't the bookstore, the Legends and Lattes, that's alien cozy.
No, it's like fantasy cozy.
Fantasy cozy.
I don't think he's got aliens. I think it's all like D&D fantasy style creatures.
We can argue this out later because I didn't read it, but everybody else in the store did. I'm the only one. I wanted to.
Aren't you guys all glad that you get to hear this?
Quibbling amongst.
It wouldn't feel authentic otherwise. I'm curious about. I think I'm curious about everything, but so tell me what the editing process has been for book 4 as opposed to book 1, 2, 3, where you did use an outside editor eventually.
Yeah. So for people who aren't aware, Sharon and I, we wrote the first one, like literally like partially at that desk and at the front desk. So
yeah, we don't monitor people.
Yeah.
So we're working. They're all writing books, actually.
Yeah. I would write on the back of the page a day calendars because they're like, that's our scrap paper. I say ours, though I'm still working here.
If there's one,
I still do that.
Yeah, there's still one there. So it's like, if this is a life hack or a writer hack for any aspiring writers, get these old page a day calendars that like they throw out after, like the year is started and they can't sell them anymore. Pages are smaller, so you feel such a sense of accomplishment when you just write on one and then you just rip it off and you start the next one. It's great. I actually have written several novels on the back of page a day calendars. That wasn't the question. The editing process, because we wrote and indie published the first 3, and I had already been indie publishing my romance, I just used the same thing where I hired an editor and a proofer and we got a cover designer and we just did it that way. But when we sold the books to Penguin and they republished the first 3, it meant that book 4 was written in a slightly different way because suddenly we had an editor and deadlines that we didn't impose. They were imposed upon us. So it was a different process and we had to write a little bit different. Like we didn't do nano for book 4. We sort of did it during the summer. And then toward the end, when we were kind of getting to the deadline, we actually had to put it into a Google Doc so we could both work at the same time, which is not our preference. We like to do the handoff.
Did you write all 3 of the first 3 books as Nano?
They were at least started during Nanos. They weren't necessarily
Finished,
finished,
yeah.
but yeah, the first one was entirely during Nano. The second one wasn't for outside life reasons. And then the third one we started during Nano, and I think it just took us a little bit longer. But yeah, and the fourth one was a different one.
Yeah, it's a good jumpstart for me. I mean, Jocelyn writes all the time, but I have a day job, so it's a good way for me to get back into daily writing.
We are going to go into questions soon, but we've made it very complicated. So, because they have some giveaways, which you showed
There are
valuable
2
prizes.
giveaways. Not the
No.
puppets. Those are for
No, that's so
sale, though.
obvious.
Yeah. Do we have our giveaways or did we leave them in the back? We are very professional.
Yeah. All right. Would you, yeah. Do you want to write? Oh, here, I'll get one.
You're the only one with the code now.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't know the code.
So we're going to have 2 giveaways, and everyone who asks a question will be able to put their name on one of the Page a Day calendar pages right here. And then we're going to put your name in the basket to draw the name.
Give away your Vixen.
Oh, well, then there'll be 3 giveaways. So so Vera, hold Vera up. She's going to be one giveaway. And then the second giveaway is this just imagine you're up close and can see it. It's a beautiful little fox pin. So it's Vera in fox form if you'd like to wear her on a coat.
In fox form, but she's now in jewelry.
Jewelry form, excuse me. Yeah, she is always in fox form. No shifters. And then the third giveaway is the British edition of Twilight Falls, which is very different in style, but we do also love the British editions. They're quite vibrant and gorgeous. So those will be our giveaways to encourage you to ask questions.
So pass me the bucket. So first of all, this was the Page a Day ad that she was referring to. Sometimes at the end of the year, we have extras. If you're a budding writer, now we're not going to have any extras because all the writers are going to come to us for the ads. So you're going to ask a question. I'm going to repeat it. And then we're going to decide if it's raffle worthy. Well, no, I'm going to tell you what the rules are. You can't ask what their writing process is. You can't ask a question. You can't ask a question that shows that you didn't read the book. Do you get it? So, but we might vote if we
I
feel
think
like
Daniel is going to use his arbitrary bookstore owner power to just decide whether your name goes into the bucket or not, and probably most of them are.
I'm not getting anything out of it. So, what was the other question I said you can't ask?
How do you get an agent?
Right.
Oh, yeah, which we
process.
literally can't answer anyway because we don't have one.
They don't have an agent. Are you the only authors at Random House, Penguin Random House, that are under 80 who don't have an agent? Because I know the old Knopf ones sometimes didn't.
Possibly. They don't.
We have a
we don't
foreign
know.
rights agent. But
Okay.
That's true. We do have one agent,
Yeah.
but that we got her after for a very specific
Right.
purpose.
Because
Yeah.
you held on to some of your rights, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So who needs an agent when they have Jocelyn? That's what I say.
That's very sweet.
Or they have
It's
Daniel.
not true, but it's sweet.
All right. So I'm gonna put the questions in unless I hear boos. All right. So no pressure on any of you.
Well, no one's going to ask anything because they're all afraid.
All right, fine. I'll put all the questions in. So do you use a pen? You know, I nobody asked that one anymore, but I was watching the Hernan Diaz interview and he uses a fountain pen.
That's a really classy way to write a book.
He
I'm not going to do that, but I admire it.
He's an Argentinian exile.
You know, I think Simon Van Boy does that too.
Oh, so, does anyone read Simon Van Boy?
He's
here?
very fancy.
Yeah, he's super fancy. Do we have any questions?
Because like as a reader, you can tell where Jocelyn and Sharon were like who had what idea. It's like Juneau Black. voice.
Okay, so the question for anyone who didn't hear it is how we achieve the singular voice with two writers. And the short answer to that is editing. So when we have our draft, like probably you would be able, like if we showed anyone our first draft, which we never ever would because it's so messy, you would probably be able to tell because we just have, like we'll do different like word choices or stuff like that. But in the editing process, a lot of it is sort of merging that and making sure that it does feel like a through line. And it's, I guess voice is just another part of the sort of aspects that that you think about when you're editing, because you're also thinking about continuity of the story and the plot and making sure that you're not repeating clues because we might be thinking of like the same thing and we're like, so Sharon wrote that clue and then I wrote that clue and we're like, oh right, we actually kind of mentioned this twice.
Does this mean, do you have a character guide for the characters then?
I mean, in sort of a hacked way, yeah.
Yeah, because the more books we write, the more characters we have to keep track of. And that was the thing, just like, do we have a hedgehog? How do we not have a hedgehog? We must have a hedgehog.
You love
Yeah.
hedgehogs.
Yeah.
I do love hedgehogs.
Yeah, so it's actually
And
weird that it took 4 books to get one, but
They're not in American forests, are they?
Well, there's no pandas in American forests either.
Yeah.
So
He clearly had immigrated. Oh, and now what are you doing now that all the pandas have to go back to China?
it's not the real world.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
we don't have to conform to those rules.
Yeah. Normal political realities do not apply to us. Did
we-
that answer your question, Beth? If you have more of a question, I can just tell you. I'm staying at Beth's.
Yeah.
Well, and-
I didn't have guess her name.
And
All
Beth,
right.
Beth, since you know both of us, you know that we have the same snarky kind of sense of humor, which helps a lot
Yeah.
because
Meryl?
When you started out, this is a non-writer question. Did you have an audience in mind? I mean, I know somebody who writes kind of like young adult books, but because it's characters, it's little animals, in the forest. Did you have an audience in mind?
well, these were always going to be adult mysteries because that's what we grew up reading Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes and Dorothy Sayers when we were tweens, probably.
Yeah.
And so they were going to be adult mysteries for adults, and that's what we had planned. Now, a lot of younger kids do read them, but I mean, we've got infidelity, we've got all kinds of adult themes.
We have a lot of
so-
coffee.
and coffee. Yeah, there's
Surprising
a great deal
that
of
kids like the
coffee.
books. But we have been surprised by the range of ages and people who are reading the books, because we would have assumed sort of one demographic, but like we've had events where family, like literal families, like parents reading with their children, and they've said that this is sort of a bridge book from younger books to older books, which we're delighted by. But we sort of just stumbled into it. We didn't plan that.
Yeah, and when we were labeled cozies, which they just sort of told us that's what we were, I just had a vision of Miss Marple kind of thing, and I didn't realize how many young people like them, which is awesome. And yeah, so it's all over the place.
Christie's always been a great bridge to adult
Mhm.
fiction.
Yeah.
So, a person in the beautiful teal hair.
Well, yeah. Oh, so the question is, do we have any favorite pieces of media or books, movies that inspired this beyond the finger puppets? And I was a huge fan of Watership Down when I was in 6th grade. And then I found that I reread it as an adult and I thought it held up really well. So that may have been one of the sparks.
Yeah, and I mentioned Redwall before, so I think that was probably floating around in my head as well. I was a big, I read The Velveteen Rabbit like a ton of times when I was really little, so I think I really like the idea of just like not even animals, but just like the idea, one of the coolest things about children's literature is that they don't care what the rules are. So like they'll have a literal stuffed rabbit be the main character, and the book works because it's amazing. So I think that it felt like, oh, if we do this, we can do anything we want. So it was, I think probably just a lot of different inspirations that maybe weren't direct inspirations, but were clearly like lurking in our brains as we were starting to figure out the story.
Okay, now I'm hearing that you could have aliens.
How much is it worth to you?
Are you asking for aliens? Do you want an alien named
Do
Daniel?
you know how one of the big things, since you're very much in the mystery world, there's a big mystery conference going on this Saturday in Chicago.
It's true.
Which all of you can go to. Huge. It's actually based on a Milwaukee one that no longer exists anymore. But one of the things that a lot of mystery writers do as fundraisers is they do auctions to get your name be a character in a mystery. So now you could not only be a character, but you could choose your species
from a pre-approved list.
With no aliens.
Hey, just saying, when you want to do a fundraiser.
I
think
appreciate
people
your
would do it.
open-mindedness and
Yeah.
you're encouraging us to branch out.
Who would donate money to be a character in the Shady Hollow series? There you go. We have in the what color sweater is that? Yeah, I love color, so that's like everything that's going on.
So I love in the bio how it always says that if you ask a question about your child, that you'll have the same answer. So I would love an example.
Well, even though I am somewhat older than Jocelyn, we have the same parents. They are identical. My mother never met a murder mystery she didn't love. And if there wasn't a body by page 2, she was not interested. So I read all her Shady Hollow, read her Sherlock Holmes, her Agatha Christie's, her Dorothy Sayers. But before that I was into Trixie Belden and Nancy Drew. But then they also went on, the parents, to the PBS mysteries, and we all fell in love with David Suchet as Hercule Poirot.
The only Hercule Poirot.
Yes, he's the only one. So yes, when we met working here at Boswell, we found that we had the same parents.
Yeah, that we, if someone's like, oh, did you read this? Yeah, of course. Did you read this? Oh yeah, of course. Did you like do the same thing growing up? Oh yeah, of course. So it was just sort of this weird confluence where we're like, how are our parents different humans? Because they were clearly, like, Sharon spent time in Florida and I did not. And, so we did have different lives, but for some reason,
Still do.
exactly the same, like, literary and sort of popular culture influences.
So I love the author notes, books that say like, okay, there are different animals in this, but they're just really skill and they can be friends. What's kind of what you said? So I was just wondering if when you were starting to write, was that something that you thought like you have to get ahead of this because we're going to yell at us, it's like a rabbit and a fox are friends? Or was that something where you had a draft and someone like told you how to do that?
We did it. And I think part of it was sort of a way to introduce people to the world. So just sort of a check your expectations at the door kind of
You
thing.
know what you're getting.
Yeah. And also it was just really fun to write that author's note. I love author's notes. And the cast of characters is sort of the same thing. Like no one told us to put that in. When I was reading a lot of the sort of older mysteries that had been published in like the 50s, 60s, a lot of them include a cast of characters, which I think has really fallen away in more modern books. But I always found it really charming. So I wanted to do that. And once we had done it in the first book, we just kept it going and we change it. It's not the same author's note. We do tweak it a little bit. And obviously the characters change too. But we just like it as sort of a style thing. And it is a good way to sort of just say, hey, reader, whatever you think you might be expecting, just be aware that it might not be that.
accidentally pick this book up instead of Ed Young's An Immense World, please be
It would
aware.
be so sad.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about that. We're on the hook for one more book in terms of this, current contract, and we have no idea what's going to come next. We have been amazed by the response to it. So I don't think we ever expected to be writing more than 3 books, or, it's been more than I think we ever would have imagined. So we're just going to see how that goes.
Now, Jocelyn does write books on her own.
I do also write books. Yeah. And so I continue to do that. But yeah, like in terms of like specifically, are we going to write more series together? I think we just haven't even thought about that because Shady Hollow is still so
Tell us a little about
central.
your most successful books on your own.
So for anyone who's not aware, I do write romance as Elizabeth Cole. And so I was a history major. I studied medieval church education, which is not employable. So I used a lot of what I had learned in my medieval history classes, and I applied it to romance, which I had been reading for fun ever since I was a little kid. I read romance at an age much younger than my mom would have approved of had she known. But those are the books that were like in the racks at the library, like in the foyer, and they'd be like, these books are too beat up. We can't have them in the library anymore. And so you can just take them for free. And so there were these gorgeous books with these women in these beautiful gowns, and they had amazing hair. And so of course I read them. And when I got older, I knew I wanted to write them. So I would say that, I don't know if it's my most popular series, but one of my favorite series is my medieval series called The Swordsworn Knights, which is about knights in the service of various lords in England and the various women they have to fight for and or protect.
And unless you think I'm not keeping up, I found in my computer the excuse me, the very first NaNoWriMo novel I wrote in 2007. And it has, two spaces after all the periods. And I went back and looked at it, and it could be something. So perhaps I will unearth it and edit it, and we'll see. So
all the way in the back.
So the question was, do we like any other books with animals?
all of them. Well, Watership Down, I mentioned earlier, is one of my favorites in the Redwall series.
Well, it's one of the, all right. So this is a thing that is happening to both me and Sharon a lot. Whenever anyone asks us a question, like specifically like titles that we'd recommend, mine goes blank. But yeah, like I think we're both like really still very attracted to books that have animals, or like books that are set in a world that's like a little bit quirky and has non-human characters. T. Kingfisher is an author who writes a lot of fantasy, and one of her characters is a sentient sourdough starter.
Oh, wow.
He's great. He's the best character.
And I haven't read this book yet, but John Scalzi, the sci-fi author, has a new book out with a cat on the cover, and there are sentient cats in the story, which I'm gonna have to read it.
Rachel loved it. Love. Oh.
Love it. Love it. We're in.
In orange.
Yep.
Yep.
So you could open obviously can't open bookstore, and then put on a
So the question was, if we could open another business in Shady Hollow, what would it be? And obviously we're not allowed to open any business that already exists in Shady Hollow, which is a difficult question. Thank you. There's not. So that's a fine idea. An ice cream parlor would be a good one. Sharon, did
That
you have
would be.
anything? I'll let you think for a moment.
Well, I was thinking about a skating rink, and then the logistics of that.
I
Yeah.
have been thinking about a perfume shop. I think that would be really fun.
No, but there's the secondhand store in,
There is
Mirror
in
Lake.
Elm Grove, there's
Oh.
a secondhand sort of like thrift store consignment that called Gleaming Gleanings, run by Magpie. And
so that
she
has
sells a lot
very
of jewelry.
shiny, yeah,
Very
jewelry.
shiny stuff. So yeah, there's room to grow. I think, would you like to join the Shady Hollow Business Improvement District?
There's room on the board, but there's a lot of meetings.
We'll get t-shirts.
Is there a garden nursery?
There is
I
not.
mean, There's not. Okay, so all right,
We're
what
gonna
I'm
map this out for you.
what I'm hearing is that we need to just build
There are
up
some
this.
holes. We've got some holes to fill.
No light.
The question was, was Vera's some of her antecedents, Miss Marple, Poirot, Jessica Fletcher, etc.
I feel like Vera is more of a Nancy Drew type.
Yeah, I think I watched all of those, so I'm sure that there's definitely
Yeah.
some of that there. We made her a journalist because I really admire journalists. I think you really admire journalists. We like their search for truth. Justice. So like there's a lot of like YA books where there's like a plucky girl reporter. And I think so a lot of that came from that. I will also say, if anyone is familiar with Miss Fisher's murder mysteries, love those so much. So I think there might be a
Yeah.
little of that in Vera as well.
So like, yeah, Vera in a cloche hat. I think that could work.
The question was, what do we ever disagree on our plots?
Well, the first one was so slapdash that we didn't know who the murderer was or what was happening until we wrote it. In
True.
subsequent books, I am what is known as a pantser and Jocelyn is a plotter. So I just write as the spirit moves me, so to speak. And Jocelyn is much more organized and has an outline, and I have come to see the value of the outline. So we get together in coffee shops and talk about murder. And so we have an idea of where we're going and the main points. And we don't really if we disagree, we have different ideas. It's not a serious thing. We usually just decide what we're gonna
And
do.
it's often a case where it's like, if one of us is stuck and we're like, well, here's an idea. And then the other one might be like, well, it's sort of a yes and thing, right? Or, like, that's an interesting thing. Could we sort of iterate on that? And so we'll actually, like, because there's two of us, we can bounce ideas off each other. And so we can figure out maybe like, it's not A or B, it's an amalgamation of A and B that actually ends up turning out to be a better fit for the story.
I just want to say, having listened to a lot of mystery writers talk about their books, I think it's like a third of them don't know who killed the person until the end of the book.
It's a really hard thing
That's
to
what
know.
makes it fun.
Well, that's the thing. It's like if you know too much, you write in too heavy-handedly in the clues.
I think that's also very true, that you don't want to telegraph too much. So if you have everything laid out, it's not fun to write because you're just sort of like filling in blanks to like a conclusion you've already decided on. But also, you don't want to lay in too much or be too heavy-handed where it's like, oh, of course they're the killer. You like practically put it on a billboard in chapter 1.
Yeah, and there are the people who do the super plotting, and they, that makes them happy. So
What we do is what's often referred to as story beats. So it's a little bit, it's not full on like, here's an outline with all the nice little indented things. It's sort of like, we're going to hit this, we're going to hit this. We know this is an important aspect. We know Vera's going to have to find a clue over here. So we sort of map it out a couple of steps before where we actually are in the writing.
in the back of the
The question was, where did we get the inspiration for the characters' outfits and clothing?
Aaron?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I don't know in the beginning if we were visualizing them as wearing clothes, but we have a very good friend that many of you may know Aaron Boyd, who is a local children's book illustrator and man about town. And he drew some character sketches for us, and they were so perfectly fitting with what was in my head that we had to
It
go
was
with
just like,
them.
oh, he's correct. We just need to go and fill this in now.
Yes, this is exactly what they're supposed to look like.
Yeah. But in terms of the style, we do the books are sort of set in not like a specific decade, because again, it's a fantasy world, but like we have this sort of like pre-modern thing. It's sort of like 1930s-ish, like in terms of like how the technology is, and like there's no computers, there's no phones, but there are typewriters, there's some mechanical things. So we kind of are going again with like this, the Agatha Christie vibe. So it's like Vera is going to be in a nice wool coat. She's going to have a, little cloche hat, because, it's just really fun to have those sort of retro designs and to make them fit the characters. So Vera's always dressed very smartly, and, Orville has got his uniform. So we try to make them fit the character.
Do you sometimes have to figure out like whether this particular animal could pull off this particular look?
Not everyone's a fashionista. So I think that we've shown that too. We've got some like frumpier outfits.
So just a little prop.
this
So
is
this
great.
is one of the original illustrations.
It's Howard
This is
Chitter's at
Howard
his
Chitter's.
desk.
He is an accountant.
And it's you come up if you can't see it where you are, like come up and see it later, because
It's so beautiful.
And Aaron Boyd drew that
And that was what definitively said, okay, these animals are going to wear clothes.
100%. I think it was his little accountant's hat. It's so cute.
Do you have any more questions? In the back on the blue?
That is 100% not true.
Yeah. That's a super interesting thing to hear.
I'm really interested in the Ed Gein installment of Shady Hollow.
Yeah, there's
I'm not from Wisconsin originally. I studied criminal justice, another unemployable major, at the University of Florida, and we have our own crazy murders down there. So I would say no, unless Jocelyn has got something going on that I don't know about.
No, I mean, it's true that Wisconsin has a proud tradition of having a ton of serial killers per capita, but that's not really our vibe. So I think that maybe something got lost in translation.
Really interesting.
Somebody else has to do that then. Yeah.
I'm not against the idea. I just don't think it's Shady Hollow. Thank you.
As booksellers, did you kind of know what kind of cover you want?
We did not get a lot of input into the covers. We have this terrific cover artist named Perry de la Vega, who is part of Penguin Random House. And when they showed us what he had in mind, we were very, very happy and very pleased, because we've heard lots of nice things about the covers.
No, they were terrific.
Yeah.
But the original, you did a really great job. I thought they were one of the things that was so much fun for me to sell the books is they looked so professional.
Yeah, so I
Those
actually
were good,
intend to
yeah.
put this on the website, because we do get a lot of questions about it, and it would be very nice if I did that so I can point people to it. But I would love to show the indie covers, and then the American covers from Penguin, and then the British covers, because they're all vastly different, but I think they all have a lot of strengths. But yeah, our indie covers were much darker and had like a sort of almost like a silhouette woodcut sort of style. And I love them. I think they're beautiful. But I think that when Vintage Crime picked them up, they were absolutely correct when they were like, we want to brighten it up, but we want to make it a little bit more modern, because it had been 10 years between the first book being indie published and then the books being republished. So they did this sort of beautiful, pastel is not the right word, but like I just love the colors. And I think that people have told us over and over again, they are shady colors, aren't they? People have said like, I picked it up because of the cover. And it's like, that's exactly what a cover should do. So good work, team.
I think we can do one more question. The person in the back, what color is that sweater? That's
sweater.
I'm not asking anyone's name. I'm just
It's a
writing
beautiful blue turtleneck.
blue turtleneck. Thank you.
So the question was, if we had to write ourselves as a woodland creature, what creature would that be? Sharon?
I know we've had this question before, and I think I was leaning toward some kind of deer because I like the whole running thing. And in one of the books we have the deer run the grocery store. Which I don't know if you've gotten to that book, I can't remember which one it's in.
I
But
think it is in Twilight Falls.
yeah.
So you'll meet the deer who
The
runs grocery
deer,
store.
the whole family runs the grocery store. So yeah, there we are.
I like to believe that I would be like a wildcat or, you know, a panther or something, because that feels cool. I suspect that if I just ended up as one of the creatures through some magical curse, I'd probably be like a rabbit because I eat a lot of salad.
Well, yeah, it's about as good a place to end as anywhere. Thank you so much. We will be having a signing at the front of the store. That is the front of the store. If you haven't bought your book yet, the books are for sale at the register. So they're all behind the desk. All
And we'll sign any book, even if it's not ours.
which is very different from some other authors who have scruples. So I'm sorry. I have no scruples. So
You're not
thank
sorry.
you all for coming. Thank you for
Wait,
supporting.
we need to
Shady
do
Hollow.
the-
But right, then
we-
we're going to do the raffle. Okay. So I am going to have you, Sharon, pick, but it might be someone might laugh and like, I wasn't wearing that color. So
Okay.
this
Oh,
is
this is
for the book.
So this is for the British edition of Twilight Falls.
Oh, well,
and the
this is
lucky
an
winner
actual-
is
Marilyn.
Marilyn.
You have now. Thank you.
I only knew 3 names. All right. It is.
Okay.
And then this one is for the fox pin. You hold the box.
They were all good questions, by the way. I suppose I didn't.
Green hair and glasses.
Oh, back row.
Now I would say blue.
Oh, yeah, I guess so, now that I see it. I was trying to distinguish between the person in front. It's still you.
It's still you.
Yeah.
And then our final one will be the Vera finger puppet who inspired it all.
All right. Gray sweater and blonde. I think it's not the back.
Is it over on the side?
Where? Who- Oh, did you ask the question, didn't you? Yes, that's you.
Thank you.
Everybody should do it this way. Anyway, well, thank you, Sharon and Jocelyn. Looking forward to so many more of these wonderful books. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah,
We
thank
wouldn't
you,
have a
everyone.
Thanks.